Good morning. I would like to thank each of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend this webinar. In this webinar, I would like to provide an introduction to NextFlex and an exciting program intended to provide business assistance to small microelectronics companies of Texas. This session will be recorded and a copy will be available on the PRISM page of the NextFlex website. Next slide, please. So we'll have the ability to address questions a couple of different ways. You can either enter your question into the questions pane, or method two, you can raise your hand, and one of the administrators will unmute you, and you can ask a question. For the most part, we should be able to address questions as they come about. But if you'd like, it might be you can also save your questions towards the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So NextFlex is is one of 17 manufacturing innovation institutes established under Manufacturing USA. And Manufacturing USA was formally established in 2014 as the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation. Manufacturing USA institutes bring together industry, academia, and federal partners within a growing network of advanced manufacturing institutes to increase U.S. manufacturing competitiveness and promote a robust, sustainable national manufacturing R&D infrastructure. Manufacturing USA includes 3 agencies and their sponsoring manufacturing institutes. The U.S. Department of Defense has 9 institutes. The U.S. Department of Energy has 7 institutes, and the U.S. Department of Commerce has 1 institute. There are 6 additional partner agencies: the Department of Agriculture, Education, Health and Human Services, and Labor, as well as the National Science Foundation and NASA. These institutes convene members from the public and private sectors to harness the potential of emerging technologies for large-scale innovation. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, NextFlex is one of the Manufacturing USA's network of member institutes, and Manufacturing Manufacturing USA has each of these institutes focus on a specific advanced manufacturing technology, but each have essentially a very similar mission in that they are to establish and grow their particular advanced manufacturing ecosystem. They are to address advancing their particular technology. In our case, it's flexible hybrid electronics, and securing human capital through a variety of workforce development programs. Next slide, please. So what is flexible hybrid electronics? And by the way, throughout this presentation, I'll probably bat around terms like flexible hybrid electronics, FHE, or hybrid electronics, which we're kind of using to be a very similar technology. And quite simply, the FHE manufacturing technology is a convergence of additive printed manufacturing and semiconductor technologies. And although hybrid electronics may be a disruptive manufacturing technology for some applications, it's primarily complementary to traditional printed circuit board and printed circuit board assembly manufacturing, and is an enabler of capabilities that otherwise could not be realized with traditional manufacturing techniques. Next slide, please. So as noted in the previous slide, hybrid electronics is an enabler of solutions that are not otherwise available with current manufacturing. For example, we're able to print on a wide variety of substrates and materials. And these substrates may be non-planar, conformable, stretchable, or flexible. And as a matter of fact, they don't even have to be any of those things. It could also be planar or rigid. As an additive process, we boast flexible and very adaptable capabilities, well suited to iterative designs and versions. That is to say, we enable rapid prototyping and product development, mass customization, and it's particularly suited for low volume and high mix production. Our vision for the future of hybrid electronics manufacturing is to also apply these learnings in expanded technologies in microelectronics and heterogeneous integration, including advanced packaging and interconnect. Next slide, please. Another way to look at and view and understand hybrid electronics is by the manufacturing process flow. Traditional printed circuit board assemblies can have upwards of more than 20 to 30 manufacturing process steps. With hybrid electronics, the basic process steps are greatly reduced and the supply base is also simplified. So each of these processes can be performed in one facility. And that really talks to the ability to enable rapid prototyping and doing a high mix of very similar products. Next slide, please. So the electronics manufacturing industry has, over the last few decades, rapid convergence of disparate manufacturing processes converging. And this slide shows where NextFlex processes and value resides. In the previous slide, we showed an example of the impact we can have on simplification of the manufacturing process and the supply chains related to PCB fabrication and system assembly. We also overlap in advanced packaging and interconnect. From our inception, NextFlex has included integration of unpackaged components directly on the substrates and on the completed systems. And one quick thing to note about this, this chain of activity, that in addition to global supply chain disruption across trade, finance, health, and defense industries, the COVID-19 pandemic exposed a vulnerable Asia-dependent supply chain, particularly in the field of microelectronics. At NextFlex, we look to the emerging technology of hybrid electronics to grow an American-based advanced manufacturing capability to, in part, secure a domestic-based localized supply chain and manufacturing ecosystem, which, by the way, talks directly to what we want to do under the PRISM system. Next slide, please. So what do we do at NextFlex? Well, I'll quickly go through these and then give you some more detail in later slides. But roughly, we maintain a consortium of about 100 members. We host networking events and present at various industry conferences. We maintain 11 technical working groups. These technical working groups are comprised of our members as well as DoD sponsors. These technical working groups are charged with maintaining 5-year technical roadmaps, which identify the gaps in their particular areas of hybrid electronics. These identified gaps, in turn, provide topical areas to support our project calls. The project calls are funded through the NextFlex consortium and are meant to close the technology roadmap gaps and other challenges identified by DoD. The project calls are solely performed by our members and our member teams. And we also maintain a technology hub, which I'll give you a lot more information on. And lastly, we have a nationally recognized workforce development team that offers diverse workforce development programs that span K through 12 STEM to incumbent upskill and training relative to advanced manufacturing technologies. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, NextFlex is a consortium of roughly 100 members. And in this particular slide, we show them broken down by their tier. Next slide, please. Another way to look at our NextFlex is by our ecosystem, or where these folks play within within the hybrid electronics ecosystem. So you'll see we have original equipment providers of all levels, from small companies to large defense contractors. We have supply chain folks, where we have electronic manufacturing services providers, contract manufacturers. We have equipment manufacturers. We have material providers, as well as research institutions and places of learning. Next slide, please. Our technical working groups can be broken down into 11 distinct working groups. And those are broken down further into technology platforms and manufacturing platforms. Manufacturing platforms are those activities that align with manufacturing capability and materials. Technology platforms detail those applications ideally aligned with hybrid electronics, particularly those that are aligned to the interests of DoD. Next slide, please. Within workforce development, as I mentioned, we have programs that span K through 12 STEM awareness, all the way to looking at the incumbent workforce. Under our Flex Factor program, we familiarize K through 12 targeted audience with flexible hybrid electronics, but also broader advanced manufacturing education, really focusing on STEM awareness and careers in manufacturing and engineering. Next, we have the Flex Future and Flex Ahead programs. These address the immediate emerging workforce coming through community colleges, as well as our universities, and address workers in manufacturing, as well as engineers and other emerging workers. And then lastly, on Flex Pro, the focus is looking at the incumbent workforce and increasing knowledge in the area of hybrid electronics and focusing on transitioning skills. Next page, please. And so all these programs work together, and we've been recognized nationally, and we have these skill sets spread across the nation, and it would be great to extend this also with programs in Texas. Next slide, please. So NextFlex, as stated in our what we do, maintains a technology hub and pilot line. And again, this is something where we might use those terms synonymously, but it's essentially one facility. And in this facility, we maintain and operate automated tools and equipment which are intended to advance hybrid electronics technology and serve the research and development and engineering needs of an emerging manufacturing ecosystem. Next slide, please. So we roughly have about 11,000 square feet of production space, and our entire facility is about 34,000 square feet. And to go into a little bit more detail on capability, next slide, please. We have a world-class printing or deposition capability with just about most every way to put ink down on surfaces, to include gravure offset, inkjet, direct write, as screen print, as well as screen printing, and plasma jet printing, quite a number of different tools. And the key thing to note is that these are all automated, or these are all automated or production tools. So we're not developing processes that can only be repeated in a lab. These are production tools that some of which are already out there in production, and some of which might be newer tools that are under development and under evaluation. Next slide, please. We also have a cutting edge automated additive electronics integration capability. And this includes wafer feeders, automated dispense for epoxies. We have automated assembly platforms and the ability to handle very thin die. And that would be unpackaged components. Next slide, please. And all this comes together with a test and reliability and automation lab. Here we evaluate the processes that we develop and ensure that there's repeatability and reliability, so that when we transfer this to volume manufacturing, we have a very firm knowledge of what's going to work and what's not going to work. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we have some new emerging technology tools. We'll call these multifunction tools. And these are tools that we're either evaluating that are relatively new in the marketplace, or there's something that we have actually developed with our members, or in some cases internally to us. And these multifunction tools represent opportunities to do all the manufacturing steps in one piece of equipment. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the PRISM program, which is a defense manufacturing community support program that's going on in the state of Texas. So the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program was designed to support long-term community investments and strengthen national security innovation and expand the capabilities of the defense industrial ecosystem. And I want to draw your attention to some key words there, where there's a focus of local defense community. And if you remember a while back, I had a little bit of commentary about the Asian-based supply chain. Well, the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program kind of supports that initiative of establishing localized manufacturing capability and supply chains. Next page, please. And under the PRISM program, NextFlex will have roughly $600K of funding. And with this funding, NextFlex will provide support to small businesses by providing access to cutting-edge hybrid electronics development and manufacturing capability. And this talks a little bit about what the overall goals of the PRISM program is, and the diversity of not only the participants, but the activities that they have. Next slide, please. So as noted earlier, NextFlex has the goal of providing support to up to 20 small businesses within the Texas geography. We also have a partner called Fuel, which also has deliverables listed there. And their deliverables are to recruit, resource, and develop 25 small businesses into microelectronic supply chains. Next slide, please. And just on a side note about Fuel, this talks to Fuel's national security roles. And again, these are the goals and objectives of Fuel. And Fuel's an important partner to NextFlex. And we're looking forward to working with Fuel to develop microelectronic supply chain within the PRISM defense manufacturing community. And then the last point is that to note is that Fuel is a local technology accelerator within Texas and within the footprint of PRISM activity, with whom we at NextFlex will work closely to help identify those Texas small to medium enterprises that would potentially benefit from services at NextFlex and UT Austin. Next slide, please. So here are objectives within NextFlex. We're looking to work with the PRISM team for the outreach, and this webinar represents one of those outreaches, and the selection of potential recipients. We look to also ensure that each of these projects is aligned to DoD's modernization priorities. And then lastly, we'll work with the small business recipients for, next slide, to provide these sorts of services. Now, these services are not all inclusive, but they'll give you a general idea of the sort of things that we can do and what we plan to do with eligible small business recipients. And the focus is that providing engineering and design services, prototype and proof of concept, de-risking of advanced technology adoption. That includes evaluating equipment as well as capability, and then providing manufacturing services if appropriate, and then lastly, enabling technology transfer. Next slide, please. Now, to be eligible to participate in this program, a company must have a principal place of business in the U.S. with operations in the state of Texas. And they should have Texas-based production and employees that work and reside in Texas. Company is a small business per U.S. Small Business Administration size standards. A company is a current DoD supplier with at least 5% of the company's revenue derived from defense orders, or the company is a potential DoD supplier. The company is owned and controlled by individuals or parent entities or investors from the U.S. We could talk a little bit more about that if you have some questions there. The company has an active registration for SAMs and is in good standing with no exclusions. The company work includes microelectronics, hybrid electronics, space, artificial intelligence, and or converging technology platforms of priority to DoD. In the case of transfer of manufacturing know-how to a given company, the company agrees that the intent is for the manufacturing technology not to transition to a manufacturing facility outside the U.S. Again, we're focused on American jobs and enabling an American-based supply chain. Next slide, please. Now, in addition to the eligibility criteria, we list here our selection criteria. Those items in red are things that are really important to our selection of the right fit. The items listed in blue are what I would call bonus criteria. That is to say, if the small business meets all the requirements above, and then we'll look to other criteria as well that's also important for us, and you'll see that listed here. Next slide, please. So you can apply to this project by going to our website at nextflex.us, and note that's nextflex, not Netflix. And you can click on that orange banner that says Small Manufacturers in Texas, or you can do a pull-down menu under the About, where you'll see PRISM program. And next slide, please. that will take you to the PRISM page. And by the way, this is the same page where this presentation will be posted for viewing at a later date. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there'll be a form to fill out with the heading of Apply Now. And next slide, please. And in that, and I've also listed a link for this particular page above there in blue. And in there, you'll be asked to fill out the following fields below. And in there, it will address a lot of the criteria that we're looking for in terms of eligibility and the selection criteria. One thing to note, if you're not sure whether or not you're eligible, no worries. You can still apply, and we can sort through that once we get your application. Next slide, please. And that concludes my briefing, subject to any questions that I might have from the audience. I really, once again, would like to thank everybody for taking the time out of their schedules to listen to me talk a little bit about NextFlex as well as the PRISM program. I look forward to seeing what kind of support we can provide recipients within the state of Texas in the area of hybrid electronics and specifically packaging and advanced interconnect. Thank you very much.